Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. New week, new theme. This time we're looking at the good black metal. Yeah, it's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek theme title, but the general idea here is good job Windows updating me on that. The general theme here is black metal that I would probably like, which hopefully retains some of that black metal core foundation, but just pushes it in different directions, maybe pairing it with genres you wouldn't expect, or being a bit more progressive in its melodic or structural composition, or utilizing cleans or some other strange thing you just wouldn't find in that very strict, traditional, repetitive third wave sound that has sort of dominated what black metal is. So, we're going to kick this off with some Behemoth, which I vaguely remember the name of this band. I think we've checked them out before, but not 100% sure on that. We're going to be checking out a live video? Maybe it's just live footage with studio audio. I don't know, but that looks live to me. The track is called At the Left Hand of God. Let's check it out. Okay, so we have a 3/4 time signature, 4-bar phrases with this acoustic guitar for the first 3 bars, but not the 4th. Beautiful little line there too to wrap that ending, wrap the intro out. With the lower growl and that riff style, feels close to death metal. The alternating vocals is very cool. We have a cool little guitar melody in here that is hard to hear. Ooh, whoa, wild half-step decisions now I was not expecting. Yeah, that was sort of a wild drum pattern too, with the offbeat accents. We had 3 layered vocals there. That worked really well. Oh snap! We got a roadie or a stage tech to get up there and provide some extra tom work. The chanting is a nice touch too. I do like visually the decision to stand behind the drummer at this point. Alright, so last week we checked out an Imperial Triumphant track that was a drum cam and it had adjusted volume levels of all the instruments in order to showcase the drum work. And I went through my reaction to it, my analysis of it, and then I said, hey, I'm going to take a moment, listen to the studio version, and see if I have any different thoughts from that. And I did, and I think I'm going to do that here as well. While I enjoyed the live aspect of it, primarily just to kind of see some of the stuff that I had a difficulty hearing, I do want to hear the original, because this was not a fantastic mix by any means, and I'm sure there's a lot of details I missed. But I do want to talk about some of the stuff I did pick up on here. I mean, first of all, the vocals, right? So they're growls. I'm not a huge fan of growls. However, there's a couple of cool things going on here. First of all 3 of our string instrument players do vocals at one time or another. Frequently, we will have a call and response. If we don't have that, there's very rarely any moment where one vocalist just dominates an entire section, and usually they're layered in some way. Whether they're both singing the exact same words and doing the same phrase, or maybe there's a little bit of overlap or something like that. Maybe they team up for a couple of words at the end of a sentence. There's always this idea that one vocalist isn't enough. And what I love about that is that each of the 3 vocalists provide a very distinct, I don't necessarily want to say monotone, at least based on that audio, that mix there, but there's not a lot of dexterity to any of the vocalists. But by having all 3 of them and pairing them up to create these other textures, these pairings that we could actually view or hear as a distinct voice within itself as far as contrast and change is concerned, I heard like 5 different vocal tones here, which allows the song to have quite a bit more variety in its vocal sound than if they only had one vocalist. Even if that vocalist did 2 different tones, maybe a high and a low, it still doesn't match the plethora of sounds we can get here. And there's even one point where all 3 of the vocalists growled at the same time. And I thought that was very cool. We get this nice growl harmony, if you will, or texture layering, which I think is more accurate of a phrase. But I mean, it's all the same thing. We're talking about stacking vocal growls. So yeah, I greatly enjoyed that. It gives the song an ebb and flow beyond just what the guitars are doing, because we'll get into that in a second. But yeah, they're doing a great job at pacing as well. But it allows the vocals to never really hit that point where it just becomes background noise or something that is a part of the song, or just a texture or whatever, because it's so monotonous in its execution. So I'm a big fan of that. I already brought up the guitars. Let's move there. So, I really like the intro. I thought that was cool. Having the acoustic guitar in there and having this back and forth between acoustic and electric for 3 bars, and then just the electric for 1 bar. And again, creating this ebb and flow. We have all this energy, and then it kind of brings itself down to the single instrument, and then we bring all that energy back, and just the back and forth between those 2. We had that nice little the nice little acoustic guitar lick at the end of the intro before bringing in the metal section. I thought that was really clean. I like that little melody. And then, though, the metal part starts. And the guitars kind of take things down a notch. It's a bit slower than I would expect. I'm honestly thinking that when I hear the studio version, there's going to be a lot of picking that I didn't hear here for whatever reason. Because what it sounded like to me was a lot of long, held out notes. There is one guitarist that they showed a couple of times, and I happened to catch the footage of it, who was picking a bit more than anybody else, alternating picking, probably eighth notes maybe. But I didn't hear that. So either they're doing what the shoegaze stuff does and using so many effects to cover up the attack, the actual picking of the string, and it really is only showcasing the pitch that comes out of the instrument, or that person's guitar is just not present in the mix at all for this specific live version. But what I did hear was these longer held out notes, quite a few of them, usually 3 bars worth, with the 4th bar bringing in a bit of movement, usually a descending or an ascending idea as far as pitch is concerned. This is the general ebb and flow or pacing that I was talking about earlier with the vocals here present in the guitars. It allows some sections to feel like they're just chill, existing on their own time, and then you add a little bit of energy to that. And it pushes the song forward and then pulls it back and pushes it forward, pulls it back. It's waves against a beach. It just feels natural. And the drums are going along with this as well. We have those really big hits on the guitar accents, but aside from that, we also have these rather standard parts where we might have quarter notes on the hi-hat and some accents on the snare. We do bring in the alternating bass kicks, eighth notes, I think, at one point as well. It really, again, is all about pacing because everything here is designed to build the atmosphere. And I will say, I mean, you know, we watched them come out on stage here. I'm going to assume this is maybe not necessarily an album opener, but definitely a live show opener. And it works so well. It is big, it is bombastic, it is intense, and it feels epic because of all the spaciousness in there. Even just looking at the final parts of the drum in the outro there. Very epic choir stuff with the vocals going over, and then you have this tom heavy idea in the drums, creating this almost like tribal rhythmic concept, and then you have the guitars in the background with their melody. Yeah, this thing just oozes atmosphere from the beginning to the end, and it's what it does very well. And it's the one thing that feels... Well, see, here's the thing. To me, black metal is atmospheric. Even outside of the atmospheric black metal subgenre, all black metal kind of, for me, aims to be a vibe. There's very little black metal that I hear that I feel is, I don't know, melodically driven, rhythmically driven. They exist, sure, but to me, black metal is very much a part of the oppressiveness of the constant 8th or 16th notes, or just the oppressiveness of the consistent rhythm and the atmosphere created from the chord progressions and the production, you know, the white noise, the crackling and all that stuff, the compression and the distortion. There's certainly black metal out there that is more melodically oriented, right? But at least in my experience, what I have been showcased, that seems to be a bit more in the minority. A lot of it's about how the song sounds. It's the atmosphere. And this song is very atmospheric. So, yeah, it's black metal. Even if they're not playing the rigid 16th notes, even if they're not, they don't have that raspy goblin black metal shriek, it's still black metal adjacent. But here's my question. Is this death metal? I know blackened death is a thing, which might be where this falls under, but, I'm listening to the riffs, and I'm like, okay, that's definitely a death metal riff. Lots of emphasis on space, use of pedal tone rather than consistent notes. You listen to the drums, and the weightiness of them, the spaciousness of them. I'm like, okay, that's also death metal. And the growls, sure, there's black metal with growling, but I don't know, the dude on stage left there, he kind of felt like a death metal growl to me. So maybe it's just this one song that is a bit more deathier, despite coming from possibly a black metal group. Maybe this is blackened death metal. I don't know. I think because of their outfits, the corpse paint, um, and the fact that this is a black metal themed week, I heard black metal in this. But I think if you had just given this to me without context, I'd probably just say it's straightforward death metal, which is probably why I enjoyed it as much as I did. Is it my cup of tea? There's some things I think that could have been tweaked a little bit to make me enjoy it more, primarily with the vocals, but I like this a lot more than I like general black metal, which is the purpose of this week for sure, but definitely around the halfway point I was wondering if this was even black metal at all. And I think the last thing that sort of cements it down is death metal, at least for me. And I'm open for explanation and context on this, right? There's a lot of people who have surrounded themselves with metal music, and they've gone through the eras themselves. They've seen the changes in the genres, and they've seen the fans craft and create all of these subgenres trying to define and classify their favorite bands and stuff. I'm just now getting into all this, so I'm coming at this from a different angle. But anyways, the solo, the guitar solo, I thought was really interesting because we had a harmonic shift in it, which I find distinctly not black metal. Now, bear with me for a second. I'm going to praise black metal for a moment. That's not to say I don't ever, but it is a genre I just don't get at times, right? But one thing black metal does really well, consistently, even in the more traditional, straightforward third wave stuff, is that if there is a lead guitar moment, it doesn't necessarily need to be solos, and solos aren't the first thing I think of when it comes to black metal, but if the guitar does take lead over at any point in time, it is super consistent with the harmonic resonance of the entire song. That is one thing black metal does very, very well, is harmony. It understands the chord progressions it's playing in. It understands the chord progressions it did play in previously. It understands the chord progressions we are going into. And it understands where all three of those sections vivisect in a Venn diagram. And it says, these are the notes I can use across all of them. And it makes transitions between harmonic elements and different atmospheres and emotional sections very consistent. Everything feels like it's a natural movement for the most part. You know, there is your avant-garde, your experimental black metal. But within the realm of the more traditional stuff, harmony is something that black metal musicians just get. It is kind of bonkers to me how prevalent strong chord theory is in the black metal area of metal that isn't really present anywhere else. Death metal? No. Heavy metal? Not really. It's really a distinctly black metal thing. And I do think it's also a gut thing. I'm sure that there's some classically trained musicians in black metal, but to me, it just feels like something you get. You listen to a lot of black metal and you want to emulate it, and you do, and you just sort of pick up these ideas or feelings or gut notions about what chords lead into what to create what feelings or emotions. It's just baked into the identity of the genre. It's fascinating. You would very rarely hear something like this where the guitarist decides to veer off in an interesting harmonic direction, utilizing notes that haven't been played at all in the song. And while most of this track feels rather vague in its harmonic resonance, that is to say, it doesn't use a lot of notes. So when you fill in that space, you can really fill it in to create a few different chords. You basically can take their base amount of notes into a few different directions that you would like to. What the guitarist ends up playing does fit with the band, but it's also it kind of runs parallel, where it doesn't necessarily line up perfectly with it, but it isn't perpendicular either, where it's clashing. It's just, it's nearby. It works, but it's a little odd. And that's distinctly death metal. It's kind of bonkers. But I did like the solo itself, the way we start off with some slower notes, ramp up into more of the shreddier stuff. It has a nice pacing, narration to it. I dug that. And it did slide back into the core song rather nicely too. It's just harmonically, it's not what I was expecting. And yeah, I was like, yeah, I should take a moment to praise black metal because, I mean, they are super consistent on harmony and chord progression. It really does blow my mind. They're like, no, I've never, you interview a guitarist, they're like, I never stepped foot in a music class. And they're over here with these like 16 chord phrases that would challenge some of the best classical chord progressions. You're like, how? It's bonkers. I love it. But yeah, so there's just a lot in here that I really enjoy, but very little that I can pull back to black metal. And it makes me think that this is probably Black in Death, which I think historically has worked for me. Now I think about it, I don't think it's a genre we've dove into a lot, but yeah. And just to wrap this up, this is a very theatric, fantastic opener song, but it is kind of empty. It has the verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, and despite being a 5-minute song, we also have the 45-second intro and then the like minute 15 drum outro. And so the song itself ends up just being like 2.5 minutes long, which is very short for what they're doing. And so there's just not a lot to dig into on that front. I'm going to check out the studio version here, see if there's any extra thoughts I have about that, and then we'll hit the lyrics. Alright, yeah, dude, studio version is so much better, and I wish I had checked it out instead of this one. I don't recall necessarily if I was told to listen to the live one or if it was just what was given to me. Sometimes people just give me YouTube links because it makes the most sense to them, I suppose. And it's not a bad choice at all. I mean, I put my stuff on YouTube, and YouTube's free, so I have access to it. It's a safe bet. And, sometimes I like to put videos up there too, give you a little bit of visual oomph to my reactions. But, yeah, there's so much more detail in here. I kind of felt that this was a bit mid-fi, maybe even pushing a little bit to the lo-fi on it, especially interestingly with all of the bass presence, but none of the treble, which is kind of backwards to how black metal does its lo-fi typically, which is more emphasis on the treble. And dude, we missed out on so much. For instance, the chorus itself enters into a semi-Phrygian thing going on, where there's one guitar that kind of takes up the entire foundation of the song, just constant 16th notes, just kind of laying down this thick atmosphere, this massive wall. And off on the left, there's a bit of a quieter second guitar doing this cool little riff that's in this like the semi-Phrygian mode. It's not like full-on Phrygian. It certainly isn't Phrygian dominant, but it has that same sort of vaguely Middle Easternness to it that I think, first of all, I think it sounds cool. I'm not sure what mode it is precisely, but it does remind me of Phrygian. And it makes the entire guitar solo make sense because this is where the notes for the solo are played in the song before the solo gets to it. Listening to the solo in the studio version, it's clearer. It's a callback to the chorus's harmonic element. And so, yeah, my entire issue with that from the live version doesn't exist at all in this track. It's literally just that I couldn't hear that quieter guitar part during the chorus, which is a bit of a shame. There's also a cool thing going on in the chorus. We have these constant 8th notes, I think, or 16th notes on the bass kick. I don't remember which one. And the dude has one of those, I think it's a China cymbal, but with the cutouts in it, the holes in it. It's just a very harsh cymbal sound. But the accents on it don't really follow anything rhythmically that makes sense. They're actually accent points compared to the vocal melody. It's accent points that kind of work in a sense when you have the rest of the words and it accent specific syllables in a sentence, but it doesn't really make sense on its own. I thought that was pretty awesome because it's very rare for me to hear that in general, but I do think it ended up working out really well to add even more punch and emphasis to those syllables that the vocalist decides to put emphasis on. There's also a really big choir throughout most of this song. Pretty much all the times that we have the vocal harsh layers, there's also a choir underneath them in the studio, and the thing just sounds epic. Basically, the choir we heard at the end isn't just at the end on the studio version. So, yeah, I mean, if you... What did I write there? Oh, yeah, there's actually a lot of places with 16th note guitar picking in it. The song sounds very blackened on the studio. So yeah, I mean, if you enjoyed this track at all and you've never listened to Behemoth or specifically this song, do yourself a favor, go check out the studio version of it, preferably on Spotify, maybe Bandcamp. I don't know if Behemoth is on Bandcamp. I would avoid YouTube when it comes to black metal. The compression on YouTube is just terrible, and black metal suffers greatly for it. But yeah, the production's actually mid to hi-fi, the studio version. So I mean, it was delightful to listen to. It still had many of those death metal touches, but it had more of a distinct black metal feel to it. And yeah, I'd wager this is blackened death metal. I'm waiting to see in the comments to kind of figure out where y'all tell me this is from, or where this is from, what kind of genre this fits into. Because I don't know, just like I like classifying stuff, right? Yeah, lyrics. Now, this is distinctly black metal. We have an anti-God song here. It's right out this title, right? At the left hand of God. Of course, you would want to be on the right hand of God if you wanted to be in his good graces. So, but also, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but Lucifer, originally under his angel name of Lucifer, was God's left-hand man before he was cast out of heaven, correct? So there might be a double meaning there, which would be pretty cool. But anyways, this is a chant, a ritual, a mantra, possibly. It starts off and says, "O serpent and lion, I invoke thee inside the shrine called life by the seven wonders, by myriad mortals that gone and are to come. Outside desert of restriction, an act of rebellion on the sea of motion, stability of matter, by serenity, strength, and beauty, by the mighty chant of every breath, in serpentine dance of blood cells, in simplicity of spells, divine names, and meta games, I greet thy presence. O snake, thou art God." And the snake, I believe, is Satan, as he was represented as a serpent in the Garden of Eden. Probably a couple other times as well. This is, it's a little prayer, a little ritual that says, I kneel before you. Give me your guidance, your wisdom, so that I can proceed through life. And that's what a lot of this is. It's about wanting to be a better Satanist, and hoping that your salvation will come in your death. Even later on, it's not just about me, it's about others as well. It says, "Arise, my sweetest friend, or be forever fallen. We have finally arrived from the prison of this life to Kali's womb, down to the earth as angels of the almighty God Chaos." It's like, yeah, it's not just me. We're in this. There's community in this this grouping of Satanists. And that's what it's about. It's about sprouting darkness and chaos through the world in the name of Satan to overtake God. What I don't get in this, though, is that the outro is apparently Islamic chanting. It translates to "There is no deity except Allah," which doesn't make any sense to me if this song is supposed to be about praising Satan. So maybe there's a connection there I don't know about. Y'all can let me in on that. Maybe it's just done tongue in cheek to be a bit of a, I don't know, a bit of an in joke. Because if I hadn't have had that translation there, maybe if the lyrics just said chanting, I would never have picked up on that little detail. But, thanks to Genius and the annotators here who translate stuff and write context. It's pretty cool, but I don't get its placement in this song. So if anyone has insight into that, let me know. Maybe it's just a thing Behemoth likes to do. I don't know. It seems kind of intentional to be some random addition, for it to be purposefully Islamic chanting and for it to be that phrase, but you never know. Those are my thoughts on what is this song called? Behemoth. So, At the Left Hand of God. Let me know what you thought of this track. If there's anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on if I was wrong about anything. Maybe you just have your own thoughts, opinions, and perspective about it. Put all that stuff down in the comments. Above that, in the description box, you're going to find a link to Linktree. It's going to take you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps it up for this one. We do have a special selection coming up next. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of the good black metal. Alright, y'all take care. Have a fantastic rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening. Always remember to be critical and not cynical of the music you listen to. Yeah, I did that backwards, but we're just going to roll with it.